Chapter 16, The First Kiss. I stood on my tippy toes, the sand blanketing my feet, and met his parted lips. At that moment, I expected him to pull away, to be caught off guard, but he didn't. I didn't want to go back to a hotel and never see him again. I wanted him to teach me how to protect myself. But Matias was a good man, I argued, and a soft moan escaped my mouth. I'd had the same look in my eyes as Irina did when her father rejected her back home. The anger consumed me, coursed through my veins, and brought out the worst parts of me. I was vindictive, spiteful, and most notably, wary of everyone around me. Irina was too young to let that fury rage through her. I knew that she just wanted to punch aimlessly, hit something, anyone, to feel better, but it never would bring back what was lost. If you protect yourself, deny others from taking what you feared losing, then you'd never have to worry about finding it again. I paused and looked at Irina, who seemed to be in contemplative thoughts as her eyes were pointed at the floor. Miriam probably didn't hear a word that I said. She hadn't broken her trance from my beta's abs. That's all for today, Win, I affirmed as I tapped my beta on the shoulder. Good work. My pleasure, Win responded, nodding his head. I was about to turn away and make my way between the ropes again when I heard Miriam's voice. So, did we both pass the screening, as you called it? I looked at my beta whose lips were holding back words. I gave him the okay to be blunt, like he usually was with up-and-coming fighters. Well, Irina, she can definitely stay. He paused before shifting his gaze to Miriam, whose eyes were wide and hopeful. I wouldn't recommend for a boxing ring for as long as I live. Irina's friend didn't find it funny and instead raised her glove at Win as if she was about to pound on him. My beta let out a laugh, and he must have found the girl's behavior cute or pathetic. I felt a heat pooling down between my legs as I felt the stubble of his beard along my soft cheek. The word man sent shockwaves through my system. I was in the grasp of a strong, respected man, and not some insecure frat boy from a university who loved the look of his comb-over more than he loved me. I latched onto Irina's arm and helped her down through the ropes, and safely onto the concrete footprint of the gym's flooring. You're leaving me with her? Win exclaimed, teasingly. Funny you should say that. If you hated me so bad, then why were you looking at my boobs the whole time? Miriam clearly was no physical fighter, but she was one with her words. Win made up some excuse about how the best fighters looked down at their opponents, or something like that, but I knew, as did everyone else, that Irina's friend was literally winning him over. While he might have found his potential suitor, and by that I meant sparring partner, I had my arm linked with Irina. I had other plans for the rest of the day with her. Chapter 18, A Day of Firsts, **** Irina POV. Can I at least change out of this outfit first? I asked as Matteo latched onto my arm. I wanted to change out of my boxing garb. He shook his head. We're already running late for something I wasn't privy to. And we're just leaving Miriam here? I followed up. Well, it seems the two of them have some chemistry between them, doesn't it? Matteo raised his eyebrow. I tilted my head over my shoulder and looked at Miriam, whose hand was dangerously close to Win's abs. Surely, she wasn't going to touch them, was she? My attention was pulled when I felt Matteo's arm let go of me, as he moved it around the back of my neck. We were walking past a group of shirtless boxers, and it seemed that Matteo wanted every man to know who I belonged to. The sea of men parted and all of them tilted their heads down as we walked past. Thank you, gentlemen, Matteo declared as we made our way out of Win's boxing club. I felt his fingers grace the side of my earlobe as he fastened my loose lock behind it. It may have seemed that way, but that wasn't the whole picture. Irina, he whispered and placed one last peck on my lips before parting again. His Land Rover was waiting for us in front of the club, and Matteo grabbed my door for me before he walked around back and entered the driver's side. I have to ask, I started as I heard Matteo fiddling with the seatbelt. I heard him signaling for me to continue, and this time no funny answers. Matteo chuckled lightly. I can't promise that, but shoot it at me, really, why go around back? You're already at the front of the car. Why make things difficult for yourself? I know it seemed like a silly question, but I found myself spending more time riding around with Matteo, who told me he didn't like having a driver because it took the fun out of driving, and it was nagging at me. Everything this man did seemed calculated, but purposeful. I knew it wasn't simply because he thought I'd run him over. Does it look like I'm the type that likes things to come easy? He tilted his head and winked at me. I wasn't sure what he was getting at. Asking another question doesn't answer the original question. I threw back at him as he put the car into drive and sped off down the city streets. He sighed, "You really want to know, huh?" He tapped his finger on the steering wheel, while he sat back, relaxed in the car's captain's chair. "Victorian era, huh?" I asked. "It's a rule of etiquette that started during the time of carriages, for two reasons. The first, because the horse might kick its hoof into the chauffeur's family jewels, but second, because it was rude to the esteemed guest riding in the carriage to walk in front of them." I sat up straight, my curiosity piqued. Matteo continued, "Kind of like not turning your back to the king or queen, just the ways of classical etiquette." "So, you're essentially saying I'm the queen?" That made him laugh. He didn't take his eyes off the road, however, essentially, in my eyes. "What do you mean?" I asked hurriedly, wanting more time touching his plump lips after tasting the sweet aftertaste of his tongue. His baritone voice was so enticing when he spoke. If he were my university professor, I'd listen to every lecture with full attention. I rolled my eyes at his comment. It sounded like something a man would call a woman he was trying to impress. "A queen, I saw that," Matteo said plainly, as he must have seen my reflection in the windshield. I really had to stop rolling my eyes because mirrors and glass surfaces were getting me in trouble. "When I say something, I actually mean it," he added. "You should know that by now. How do you plan to prove that?" I teased, thinking he wouldn't have a good explanation. But he did. "Look out your window," he urged, and I turned my head and immediately my eyes were in rapture. "We're in the design district," Matteo clarified, but I didn't need it. I knew where we were. It was Miami's premier shopping and architectural hub, and even though I lived a pretty affluent life until now, I never had the chance to spend time there. After Mama passed, I really didn't have a woman in my life to accompany me in retail therapy. Miriam was my best friend for a lot of reasons, but she came from a lower economic threshold, so bonding over shopping wasn't one of the things we did. I know, I cleared my throat. I lived in Miami my whole life. I just never came here. You didn't seem like the type of woman who would. Matteo released a hearty laugh that rose from his diaphragm. He pulled the car up to a valet who said he would take it from there. This time, another valet worker opened my door for me before Matteo had a chance, and I heard a slight growl from his throat. Once we were out of the car, I asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" "The mafia never births good men," he sighed as he tucked another loose strand behind my other ear. "How about we get you to the hotel?" He looked at me as if to say he didn't want to leave either. "What?" He must have been playing ignorant, because there was no way he forgot what he said. I scoffed. "The whole thing about me not being the type of woman." I paused, waiting for him to explain himself. "You should take that as a compliment." He took my hand and led me onto the sidewalk. I let the comment go, and transitioned to another topic. "Why are we here, by the way?" I guess I was full of questions. A doorman at the Dolce & Gabbana boutique opened the door wide for us as Matteo led me inside. Immediately, we were met by a horde of sales associates. "It's a pleasure to see you again, Mr. Castaneda," a middle-aged East Asian woman greeted. "It's a pleasure to be back, Irene." Matteo let go of my hand, but I wished he hadn't because I felt I would be mobbed by the sales associates. "And who is the lucky woman?" Irene asked, her eyes pointed at Matteo's, but I figured I'd answer to be on the safe side. "A friend," I exclaimed hurriedly. "Friends that hold hands," Irene followed up skeptically. "She wouldn't be the woman you were telling me about a few days ago, Mr. Castaneda?" "Your girlfriend?" I nearly choked. The blood was rushing to my face, and my whole body felt saturated in flames. Did she just say I was Matteo's girlfriend? I darted my eyes to Matteo, and all I could see was a slight smirk on the corner of his face. This man. He saved me from trouble as quickly as he put me back into it. "She's the one, Irene." Matteo's smile widened, and I couldn't tell if he really believed that just because we shared one kiss on the beach, or if this was all some sort of bigger plan of his to wind me up. He put his arm around my shoulders, and the army of associates parted as he walked further into the boutique. Irene seemed to understand Matteo without him having to tell her anymore. I felt the sand beneath my feet shift, and I knew without looking that he was getting ready to walk away. I grabbed his wrist before he could have made it too far. "Let's go to the private collection," she smiled. I was sure she was so happy because she knew when Matteo walked in that she'd be getting a large commission. As we were walking towards the back of the store, Irene engaged in some small talk. "May I know the lovely lady's name?" "Irina," I answered. and Matias seemed pleased that I continued to use the nickname he gave me. It's a beautiful name, just like yourself, Irene fawned. I took every compliment she said lightly, because I knew if I came in here by myself, or with Miriam, she wouldn't even bat an eye at me. I detested the way these luxury boutiques treated shoppers, but if she was being fake, I thought I'd be fake back. I love your scarf, Irene. Her pupils dilated and her jaw dropped. She looked utterly offended. Was my acting that bad? Mateo released a laugh. That's not a scarf, he whispered in my ear. I was thinking, it looks like a scarf, it wraps around the neck like a scarf, and by all counts of the definition, it is a scarf. Irene regained her composure. It's a silk twilly. A what? I didn't mean to say that aloud, but in all my years of education, I'd never heard the word twilly. I would have been okay knowing that it never existed. Quite frankly, a twilly is a long, narrow, silken scarf which can be wrapped around the neck, around one's head, as an accessory, she clarified. All I heard in that was narrow, silken scarf, which brought me back to my first point that it was, indeed, a scarf. The extra nomenclature was unnecessary. I heard Irene clear her throat. Ahem, Miss Arena, would I be remiss to assume that you don't go shopping often? You'd be correct, I stated. No, I uttered in defiance. His eyes widened. I had his full attention. I don't want to go. A low chuckle released from his mouth, the tone almost gravelly like a loose pebble lost amongst the sand. I didn't like where this was going. You didn't seem like the type of woman who would. Why did everyone keep saying that? I kept my composure as best as possible. My fists tightened balls behind my back so she couldn't see and replied gracefully, there's a first for everything. I feigned a smile back at her. Mateo even seemed to be annoyed by Irene's treatment of me, and his tone firmed up. She'll need a dress for tonight. Yes, Mr. Castaneda, Irene responded. A dress? For what? I leaned over to Mateo, about to ask him, as we approached an all-black room that was outfitted in marble walls and floor with metallic golden racks for clothing. There was only one of each item, and they were sparsely, yet purposefully placed. It felt hollow and bountiful at the same time. Mateo's long fingers wrapped around my arm, which brought my attention back to myself, and reminded me that I was severely underdressed for the occasion in my boxing garb. No one seemed to question it, probably thinking it was a part of the new spring-summer collection. I felt his dark eyes boring into the side of my head. However, I was looking around in awe at the austerity of the room. I promised you I'd treat you like a queen. I broke my gaze and looked up at Mateo, his lips curled in the corners, his 5 o'clock shadow outlining his jaw. He exuded confidence, elegance, and mystery. It was said that an outfit doesn't make the person, but the person makes the outfit. I imagined it didn't matter what he was wearing. Mateo would always embody these characteristics, and it didn't matter if I wore a $10,000 dress. I'd always cling to my humble beginnings. It didn't take me long to find the dress that I liked. It was a modern take on a damask gown, black with embroidered rose petals lining the hem, and sequined diamonds sprinkled between them. As much as I'd love to, we can't just stay on the beach forever. Then take me with you. I hastened my speech. I covered my mouth as I realized what I had just said, and even Mateo looked surprised by my forwardness. There was a slit at the top of the thigh that accentuated my legs. Like it? I shyly grinned as I stepped out of the dressing room in the gown. It was a bit flamboyant for me, but I figured since we were in an Italian luxury boutique that I'd live by the motto, when in Rome. Mateo was never one to be shy, but I could see a bit of redness flush into the top of his exposed ears where his long, dark hair had been tucked behind. Spectacular, was all he said, and I didn't know if he was referring to me or the dress. Irene looked suspended in a trance as I spun around the middle of the room in the gown. I assumed it was because dollar signs were clouding her vision. Mateo cleared his throat. What drew you to that one? If you're going to keep walking around the back of the car, I figured I'd do my part to fit the Victorian tradition. A glint in Mateo's eyes seemed to say he was impressed, and the corner of his eyes turned up in a smile. I smiled back, genuinely this time, and butterflies rose in my stomach in anticipation for our date tonight. ## chapter 19, in the stars, **** Arena POV, with the dress in hand, he brought me home, telling me to be ready at 7 p.m. sharp. Knowing Mateo, I made sure I'd be ready at 6:55 p.m. and waiting at the front door. I managed to secure a nap for a few hours in between arriving home from dress shopping and leaving for dinner. I also enjoyed a relaxing bath in the reverse osmosis bathtub again. this time making sure to lock the door and not to fall asleep. There was about an hour left before my deadline to meet Mateo at the door, so I figured I could take my time getting ready, doing some basic makeup, and putting on the dress. But then my plan was interrupted by a call from Miriam. Momentarily, I felt guilty that I hadn't checked in on her earlier, when seemed like a good guy, being Mateo's beta and all, so I kind of let it slip my mind. But, I thought, Mateo started. Before I stopped him, "Take me, please," I repeated, and the look in his eyes told me that even though he may not have understood me, he wasn't going to leave me behind. "Sorry, I started, but Miriam interrupted me. "Don't be sorry, Kat, or should I call you Irina?" "Well, you've always been Kat to me, so I don't think I'll be changing that," she declared, not giving me the opportunity to respond. She didn't even take a breath. My time with Win was incredible. I imagined she was jumping up and down on the other end of the phone. I'm really happy for, and the best part was, he let me touch his abs. Finally, the line went silent, so I tried again. "Oh, that must have interrupted again. You've known me for a long time now, Kat. Guys just don't give me two glances." It was true, they didn't, but it wasn't because of her looks. Her deep mocha-colored skin, her black, kinky hair, and her chocolate eyes were enough to make any man or woman go wild. But, her parents always worked hard to send her to affluent schools where she was looked down upon because of her parents' rank in the pack, and their economic status. Fair or not, guys stayed away. Well, their loss. I managed to get in. Win seems like, he really is a great man. I mean, older, yes, but sexy. Age ain't nothing but a number girl. You know the Aaliyah song? Miriam cheered out. Speaking of sexy, your man. I felt my cheeks flush even though I was in the privacy of my own bathroom. I cleared my throat and mustered a yeah, before my throat closed up on me. Was he really my man? I knew we had kissed, I knew I felt safe around him, and I knew he was taking me out on a date, but I wouldn't have said he was my man. I mean, he was old enough to be my dad. That's not true, Mary, I said, using the nickname I used to call her, and not about him being sexy, about him being my man. At least not yet anyway, she slyly muttered. Look, Kat, he's hot, he's rich, and the way he looks at you is, not like he's just a friend. It had been a week since Mateo let me stay in his home and life had been peaceful ever since. For me at least, Mateo was not home much. I heard him leave before dawn and come home past dusk. I know you're probably worried about what others will think because of his age, but hot daddy romances are totally in right now. I heard her giggling excitedly on the other end. As much as I wanted to hear my friend happy, I knew I had to start getting ready for the date. Conversations with Miriam have lasted 5 hours before, and on a conversation about hot guys, I was expecting it could take longer. Okay, Mary, well, I should get going, but I'm really happy things went well with you and Win. Why so soon? Going on a date? Miriam pried. I scratched the back of my neck. No wonder she was my best friend, she knew me so well. No, I have cello lessons. That was the best excuse that I could come up with. So that's why they're calling IT now. I just knew the widest grin was plastered across Miriam's face. Have to go now, talk later, bye. I quickly hung up on my friend. I felt my whole body getting warm and my cheeks rosy red. I wasn't a prude in the slightest sense, however, it just felt so wrong to be thinking about Mateo in this way. He helped me, he saved me. I kissed him in appreciation in the spur of the moment. I was staying with him because I had nowhere to go, and he was kind enough to let me live here for the time being. Once fall semester started up again, I'd go back to the University of Miami and be out of his hands. There was no reason to get attached. Plus, he was an alpha and a billionaire entrepreneur. He surely didn't have time for a college student like me. The call with Miriam took longer than I had anticipated, and now I had to rush to make Mateo's deadline. I allowed my hair to cascade down in their natural waves, and I did a bit of makeup, concealer, foundation, eyeliner, and mascara, before suiting up in the damask gown Mateo had just purchased for me. He returned my kiss but didn't deepen it like I had hoped. Matias placed one hand on the middle of my back and pulled me closer to him, only to open his mouth more, but not to kiss, rather to speak. He claimed it was business, however, my mind already had the sense that he isn't any typical businessman. Since it was Saturday, he was at his home office, and I had a request to make. It just crossed my mind that I didn't have heels to match the dress, though. I didn't worry too much. I figured I could call a maid and maybe use one of Lucia's pairs of shoes. As I was about to leave my room to fetch a maid, I heard a polite knock on the door. I opened the door to see a maid standing in front of me with a neatly wrapped box extended in her 2 hands. "Miss Irina, a gift from Alpha Matias." I reluctantly took the box, not because I was scared something might jump out of it, but because I wasn't used to being treated so well. Thank you?" I muttered aloud, and the maid bowed and scurried off. I closed the door again and unwrapped the package. It was a tannish shoe box with elegant white lettering that read, "Christian Louboutin." Matteo, he did not? I wasn't one for material things, but I couldn't deny that when I was a teenager, my dream was to own a pair of red-bottom heels. Maybe it was a bit shallow compared to what I dreamt about now, but still, my younger self would have been crying happy tears if she saw this moment materialize. I neatly unfolded the wrapping paper inside and hoisted a shoe out of the box, championing it like a trophy while the sunset through the window reflected off of it. It was so shiny, so glossy, so classic, the black stiletto with the red heel. It would match perfectly with the dress I picked out. But, surely, he didn't know my size, right? I moved over to the bed and carefully let the shoe slip around my heel and my toes. Then, I did the same with the other one, the perfect fit. After allowing myself a few minutes to waltz around the bedroom in bliss, I strode confidently towards the front door, each step echoing through the house. Compared to where I had been when Matteo found me, to where I was now, it was like night and day. I felt powerful, I felt bold, and most importantly, I felt cherished. The sun had just risen, and I shuffled in with a pair of fluffy Hello Kitty slippers, which I assumed to be his daughter's, as well as that same Dolphins t-shirt over some gym shorts. As I was walking, I heard Matteo's voice in his office on the phone. I shouldn't have stopped to listen, but I heard his daughter's name mentioned and froze. "Thank you, Rico. I appreciate your effort. If you hear anything more, you know my number." That was my cue to keep walking. I reached the front door at 6:53 p.m. and was proud of myself. I twiddled my thumbs waiting for Matteo to see me ready on time. I heard his dress shoes approaching steadily down the hallway and towards the front vestibule. The mansion was more like a hotel, so that was the word I found most fitting for this part of the house. He rounded the corner and his eyes widened and his mouth gaped. Was he really that surprised to see me on time? I did a small curtsy, and, holding the sides of my dress, did a half spin. He approached, a slight grin on his face. "You look stunning," he remarked. He did, too, in a velvety, red suit with black lapels that sculpted his body perfectly, revealing his toned figure. "Thank you," I replied, but pointed to my wrist as if a watch was there and continued, "But, look at the time." He exposed his golden wristwatch and the smile on his face widened further. 6:54 p.m., you know how to please me. The way he said it was innocent, but the words "please me" made my heart quicken. I do my best. I sighed in relief and then added, "Oh, and thank you." I extended my heels to show him the black stilettos. "How did you know my size?" "Lucky guess," he smirked. I wasn't sure if it had anything to do with luck. However, I didn't mind. His enigmatic ways were starting to enchant me. The door was left open, so I figured it was okay to go in. And as soon as I entered, he greeted me. "Good morning, Irina. How was your sleep? Shall we?" Matteo extended his arm so that I could intertwine mine with his. "Certainly." I nodded and weaved my arm through, and one of his butlers grabbed the door for us. The young man bowed. "Thank you, Manuel," Matteo said kindly to his butler, who was holding the door. Manuel's eyes looked up, not directly at us, but he showed his appreciation all the same. "You're most welcome, Alpha Matias." I couldn't help but notice the way that Matteo treated everyone, no matter what their social rank was, so well. The way his maids and butlers all behaved in the mansion showed me they were diligent, like their alpha, but also at peace with who they were working for. Small details like that made me appreciate Matteo even more. A man that has to flex his muscles all the time for people to respect him is not the type of man that I want to be around. At first, I thought Matteo was that type of guy who used his status to get his way, but now, I noticed, that wasn't entirely the case. Outside of the doorway was another new car that I'd never seen him in before. "How many of these do you have?" I asked, bewildered. "What? Rolls Royces?" Just one, he replied plainly, like it was a normal thing to own a Rolls-Royce. I meant cars, I clarified, and he laughed. I don't keep count. I rolled my eyes, and before he could say it, I declared, yeah, I wanted you to see it this time. He hadn't stopped grinning since he saw me at the front door, and he opened the rear door for me and allowed me to slide in. Instead of walking around back and getting in the driver's seat, he slid in next to me. It hadn't even occurred to me that there was a driver behind the wheel. Good, I answered groggily. How was yours? I didn't know if it was rude not to ask, so I did. In reality, I still found it awkward to talk to him after our kiss. Mateo must have seen the confusion spread across my face. We have Jeeves driving us tonight, he relayed to me. Thank you, Jeeves. The driver named Jeeves slightly rotated his head towards the back seat and answered, It's my pleasure, Alpha Matias. Jeeves put the car into drive and we took off. Why aren't you driving? I asked. The back seat felt a bit stuffy being so close to him with his bergamot scent and his tall figure. Is the lady disappointed with my driving already? I heard Jeeves speaking in the front, to which Mateo laughed. Oh, Sir Jeeves. I didn't know why I called him that. I most certainly wasn't trying to offend. I'm just used to Matias, Alpha Matias driving. Mateo seemed to be enjoying himself in the seat next to me. He reached his arm across the middle seat, which had 2 glasses of champagne resting in the lacquered cup holders, and laced his fingers between mine. His fingertips were warm like embers on an extinguished fire, although I was sure mine were as hot as a burning flame. His red velvet suit must have matched the color of my cheeks. In a low, baritone, sultry voice Mateo reassured me, Look up at the stars, you'll feel more relaxed. What stars? I whispered, looking at the cloth headliner. Jeeves, show Miss Irina the sky, he gently commanded, and, with the flick of a button, the roof of the Rolls-Royce lit up with a scintillating starlight pattern that flickered ever so gently. With his free hand, Mateo lifted a champagne glass and passed it to me. Then, he grabbed the other, a toast, he called out. To what? I asked, shyly. He was nearly old enough to be my dad, yet, I had already tasted his lips, which made things weird between us. At least, it was still weird for me. He sat back comfortably in his seat and sighed. To whatever's in the stars tonight, ## chapter 20, King me, *** Arena POV, Jeeves, if you please, Mateo asked politely. Certainly, Jeeves acknowledged and stopped the car in the middle of an empty parking lot. I was slightly confused. I thought we were going out to eat. I didn't want to say anything, though. It felt rude to expect something more than Mateo had planned. As soon as he put the vehicle in park, Jeeves exited and opened the door for Mateo, allowing him to exit first. I'll take it from here, thank you, Jeeves, Mateo declared and then walked around back to help me out of my seat. My 2 feet had just reached the pavement when Mateo started enacting his plan. Close your eyes for me, he ordered softly. Why do I? Can you trust me? His voice was low, smooth, and sultry as he spoke, even though I was sure he didn't intend it to be. The word trust held a lot of weight for me. I knew it wasn't supposed to be such a deep question, but I treated it that way. If I was trusting someone enough, I'd close my eyes and let them take me away. Then I was trusting them with my life. Fortunately for Mateo, after how he had proven himself the past few days, albeit a short time, my gut still saw him as a trustworthy man. Excellent. His composed cadence sent tingles flooding through my veins, followed by his fingers gracing my cheekbones as he began tying his silken handkerchief around my eyes like a blindfold. After it was tight enough, Mateo grabbed my hand and began leading me forward. We walked for a while, and when I asked him where we were going, he wouldn't answer me. Predictably, of course, you got me these stilettos as a punishment, didn't you? I teased, referring to how long I had to walk in a pair of 6-inch heels. Although, I was the one who initiated the kiss, not him, so it was my fault, but, at that moment, my body had overcome me, and oddly enough, I didn't regret what I had done. I'm sorry, Irina, it was between the Louboutins or a pair of Crocs, and I just figured you'd appreciate the craftsmanship over comfort, he chuckled before continuing. But, if my princess is in pain, allow me to fix that. Out of nowhere, I felt the ground beneath me fade away as my legs were swung into the air. He literally swept me off my feet. That better? I couldn't see Mateo, obviously, but I imagined he had a mischievous smirk on his lips at that moment. Much. I assured him with a cheery voice. as if I truly was a princess being spoiled. I basked in the feeling of the wind as it whistled past my face and the sun's dull evening rays met my skin. It seemed as if we were near the water because I could hear the crashing of waves, along with a stronger breeze than before. He wouldn't admit it, however. It seemed as if his pace was a bit slower than when we were in the parking lot, which made me wonder if we were on sand now. Am I too heavy? I joked, and he must have taken it as a challenge, because he sped up his pace again, his breaths becoming heavier. I comforted myself with the fact that this dress alone probably weighed 20 pounds. With a slightly strained voice he replied, "Absolutely not." I concealed my grin. There was something about this man, and maybe the most important part was that he behaved like I always expected a man in my life to act. In fact, he was more than a man, he was a true gentleman. With his firm arms cradling me, I came to the realization that his age played in his favor. A lot of the guys I met were just that, guys, boys, immature, non-committal. Their priorities were twisted, especially ones at college. This man had saved me from the most unthinkable horror. Even Felix had told me that anyone who was sent over to the VIP section of the stables never returned to tell the tale. However, Mateo, a man who could have a million excuses under the Miami sun not to spend time with me, as an alpha, billionaire extraordinaire, didn't. I heard an extended sigh coming from his lips and all movement paused. "We're here," he announced. He slowly placed me on my feet, and immediately, I felt the sand overtake my stilettos and envelop my toes. I was right about the beach, but what I wasn't right about was everything else. He undid the blindfold and commanded gently, "Open." Instantaneously, at the moment I jarred my eyes open, I was enchanted. The scene in front of me was a literal fantasy playing out before me. "How did I do?" he pried, curiously, but I knew that he knew already. "It is perfect, more than perfect," I breathed. A long, velvet carpet extended in the sand towards a singular squared-off dining table sitting on the edge of the ocean, the waves slowly rolling to the feet of the table, but not quite touching them. The sunset illuminated the scene, however. A few sparsely placed candles in the sand lit up the path to the table. An orchestral quintet was playing serene classical music nearby. Brahms' Weekendlied, Guten Abend, Opus 49 No. 4. Mateo spoke slowly, pronouncing every word correctly. "You must have spent hours memorizing that," I teased him, and he laughed guiltily. "Anything missing?" he asked me, a faint sense of uncertainty in his eyes. I knew he put everything into this dinner, and truly, there was nothing amiss. "Maybe just a crown, for a certain princess?" I had a smile on my face, but he turned stiff. I knew he was already conjuring up how to get a crown made. I waved him off before he got too far into the brainstorming process. "I'm completely joking. It's more than I could have ever wished for." "Well, I did, and it was all due to Mateo. I didn't do much sleeping," Mateo replied regretfully, which pulled me out of my thoughts. Truly, he was a perfectionist in that regard. I knew my answer probably didn't appease him, but his effort alone tonight had me feeling so cherished, to the point I indulged in being spoiled. "Shall we? Before the food gets cold?" Mateo held his hand out and guided me gracefully to the table. He led me to the cushioned wrought iron chair and helped me sit before seating himself. Out of nowhere, Jeeves approached holding 2 glass vases of water. "Long time no see, Miss Arena. May I interest you in sparkling or still?" I smiled at the sight of Jeeves. He was a graceful, elderly gentleman, nearly bald but white hairs around the brim of his scalp, and thick snow-white eyebrows. He was outfitted in a crisp tuxedo and had a slight Afrikaner accent which let me know where he originally came from. "Sparkling," I answered, and Mateo seemed impressed with my decision. "Very well." Jeeves approached and poured me a glass before moving over to Mateo to do the same for him. "Your food will be out shortly." "Thank you," I relayed to him with a wide smile. He was so heartwarming. Mateo's lips parted. "He's been with me for a long time now. Ever since I was a child. He's a great man. I could tell that just by his eyes," I remarked. "What can you tell by my eyes?" Mateo winked at me. My heart skipped a beat when he did so. "A lot and a little at the same time," I explained. "Oh, really?" He sat back in his seat. My cheeks flushed as I made eye contact with him. I gently rubbed my collarbone nervously, but his pupils wouldn't waver from mine. I answered, "I see cinnamon buns." That was all I could have mustered under his smoldering gaze. "I'm sure you're a busy man. It must be hard to rest," I said. Yet, he shook his head. It hadn't occurred to me until now that even though it was early in the morning on the weekend, Mateo was outfitted in a crisp button-down and khakis. Cinnamon buns? The way he repeated it made me so embarrassed. If I had even an ounce of romantic or poetic blood in my body, I prayed to the moon goddess that she would let it work its magic now. Precisely, I see an outer ring of white around the pupil, just like the sweet frosting. Then, I see a caramel-colored shade in between that and a darker brown. Something more chocolatey. The way everything blends together reminds me of a cinnamon swirl. It's sweet, but not overbearing, if you unravel everything piece by piece. The moon goddess heeded my call. Thankfully, Mateo leaned forward, finally breaking eye contact, and took a sip of his water. Impressive, he remarked before a young man approached holding a bottle of wine. Interested in tonight's wine selection from Mr. Castaneda himself? The young male asked. I didn't drink much, but I nodded, feeling it would be perfect alongside the meal. Ladies first. Mateo motioned the server over to me so that I could try the wine first. He approached me, uncorking the bottle, and gently pouring it into my wine glass. Chateau Lafite Rothschild from Pauillac, France, dated 1844. He put an extra oomph into pronouncing the French words with more emphasis. I nodded my head in appreciation, although I had no idea what all those words and numbers meant. For you, Mr. Castaneda? The boy asked, to which Mateo nodded. I couldn't help but notice that the young man's hands were a bit shaky. At first I thought he was nervous being close to Mateo, but then, I noticed his foot sliding in the sand. Oh no, I thought, right as I stood up from my chair, hoping to mitigate the disaster that unfolded in my mind before it actually happened. A splotch of the red wine missed the glass and landed on Mateo's suit. It made me think, did he always wake up so pristine? Nothing to do with business, he admitted. He turned away from me and looked toward the window where the sun was rising above the ocean. I am so sorry, Mr. CCCC Castaneda. The waiter dropped to his knees in the sand, begging for forgiveness. Mateo waved his hand, dismissing the apology. Don't be sorry, Pedro. This isn't a typical setting to serve food and beverage. Also, my suit is the same color as the wine. No one would notice. Mateo urged the waiter to stand, and when he did, Mateo dusted sand off of the boy's uniform. Thank you, Mr. CCC Castaneda. I won't let it happen again. The boy scurried off. You're not mad? I asked, curiously. Normally, people of his power status would have been fuming. Not at all, he affirmed. I'd been in that position once myself, he admitted. I wondered what he meant by that. You were a waiter? I followed up. I've worked a lot of jobs to get where I am now. I wasn't born into this type of life, so I remember not to act like an entitled shole if I can help it. He laughed, taking a sip of his wine. I'd love to see you, Mr. Billionaire Alpha, wearing a server's uniform. The thought alone made me smile. Mateo chuckled deeply. We can roleplay sometime. His voice was sensual again, as if he was teasing me. Was this just the appetizer to the main entree later tonight? Was that what he had planned? I downed my glass of water so quickly after feeling my throat closing up at the embarrassing thought. Well, embarrassing and sexy, maybe I was just nervous? Jeeves, without missing a step, returned to refill my water, and at the same time, the boy returned carrying the plates of steaming food. I wondered where all of this was coming from, but I decided it was more magical if the logistics were shrouded in mystery. Pedro redeemed himself this time, serving the dishes elegantly with composure. Call me Mateo, he whispered, the feeling of his warm breath resting on my lips as his eyes pointed down at mine. His brown orbs, which looked more like a deeper cinnamon, had changed under the sun's rays, and they appeared softer, more like the color of the sand beneath us. Family matters, he confessed bluntly. I assumed it had to do with his daughter who was still out there, so I didn't press the issue further. Mateo reached into his blazer's inner pocket and pulled out a wad of $100 bills. There's more to be gained from making mistakes and learning from them than not making any mistakes at all, Mateo reassured the boy before handing him a hefty tip. The whole interaction was charming, and I was starting to see how Mateo treated the members of his pack, regardless of their status, as his children. Not as a replacement for his lost daughter, Lucia, but rather as an extension. Pedro bowed, taking the money in both of his hands, before thanking his alpha and leaving us in privacy. The food was delectable, a tender duck breast, served with fine haricots as Mateo referred to them, and glazed mushrooms in a creamy bordelaise sauce. Under the moonlight, with an ever-so-subtle ocean breeze, Mateo and I shared conversation, many laughs, and even more coquettish glances at each other. I couldn't keep my eyes from wandering when a droplet of sweat from the steamy evening trickled down his scarlet lips and ran down his neckline. He wasn't privy to it, but it made the area between my thighs pool with a warm heat as I followed the droplet farther down his body and imagined it running past his abs and even farther. By that point, we had already had a few glasses of wine and had even tasted the creme brulee, although we were already full from the meal. Everything was truly a dream, and it continued when Mateo lifted me out of my chair and ran towards the ocean with me in his arms. With the water up to his knees, he bent me over, my hair dangling into the ocean. He placed a long, tender kiss on my lips, working his tongue deep into my mouth. After the pause, luckily, he restarted the conversation, not to sound insensitive, but what has you up at this hour? I always wake up early. I wasn't sure if the ocean's waves were touching my pelvis, but I was feeling wet, so wet, I needed more of him. I craved him. At that moment, with the stars twinkling, and the moon reflecting off of the water's surface, I moaned. Mateo pulled away from his kiss to allow me to speak. I don't think princesses wear crowns, only queens, I clarified. I guess I'd need a king to solve that problem. Is that so? Mateo didn't break his gaze with me, but I could tell a slight smirk crept across his lips. Then how can we fix that? King me, I begged, raising my head up, drawing our lips together once again. ## chapter 21, when sparks fly, **** arena POV, king me. As soon as the words were out of my mouth, I saw fire flare in Mateo's cinnamon-swirled eyes. Are you sure you know what you're asking for? Mateo whispered, his breath feathering along my lips. I dipped a glance down to Mateo's lips, then looked back into his eyes. Yes, Mateo captured my lips again, and I felt warmth pooling between my legs that had nothing to do with the water. The ocean sucked at my dress, but Mateo still walked through the water with me in his arms. He was impressively strong. Where are you taking me? I asked, wrapping my arms more tightly around the back of his neck. Somewhere away from prying eyes, Mateo murmured. He nuzzled along my jaw and nibbled my ear. I could have melted right then. I imagined the staff had made themselves scarce, and I hadn't seen anyone else on the beach, but Mateo was right. Best to do this somewhere private. Mateo walked us into a small inlet between some high rocks. It was private, secluded, exactly what we needed. Ever done it in the ocean? Mateo asked hotly in my ear. I swallowed. I thought about lying to him, just in case my virginity put him off. It's just that you've already left by this time, I clarified. I heard an O sound come from his direction, and he turned back to face me again. But I'd always heard men can tell. I bit my lip. I've never done it anywhere, I whispered. Mateo's eyebrows shot up. With a body like this? He gaped, cupping a breast through my dress. My nipple hardened under his touch, and I knew he could feel it under his palm, because he almost purred. So responsive, Mateo remarked, kissing me thoroughly. I could still taste the wine on his tongue. So, it's not a problem? I panted once we broke for air. Not in the slightest. If anything, I'm honored, Mateo replied. I blushed. Me, too, I whispered softly, playing with his shirt. I don't know about you, Mateo murmured, but I think we're both wearing too many clothes for this event. Someone should do something about that. I agreed, though. Speaking of clothes, this dress is about to be completely ruined, isn't it? Completely, Mateo confirmed. I swallowed at the hungry look in his eyes. And the shoes? I asked, my voice pained. Mateo slid a hand down over my calf and plucked one of the shoes off me, not breaking eye contact for a second as he dropped it in the water. I'll get you new ones, 100 pairs, if you like. I might hold you to that, I joked. Mateo smiled enigmatically as he began pulling down the zipper at the back of my gown. It was a tailored dress, so it was well hidden, but Mateo's fingers found it naturally. Once the gown was open to my waist, he pressed his palm against my bare back and pulled me up against him. I could feel his hard length even through his trousers, and the heavy, wet folds of my dress. Kick it away, Mateo commanded as he nibbled my neck. I've got you, indeed. His grip on me was strong as I wriggled the rest of the way out of my dress and kicked it away from us. It half floated, half sank, and was absolutely and completely ruined, I knew. I continued, in any case, I came here to ask you something. He didn't look skeptical, or wary that I would ask him for a favor, like I expected someone in his position to. But I had a hard time caring as Mateo stared down at my bra-encased breasts. Take it off, Mateo growled. My fingers shook with anticipation as I reached behind me and fumbled with the clasp. I couldn't remember ever being so awkward. Mateo lowered my bare feet to the sand beneath the water, and he pulled my ineffective hands away from my bra, placing my palms on his chest. I was so entranced by the toned warmth beneath my hands that I barely noticed when, in one sure move, Mateo rid me of my bra. Ay, Dios mío. Sweet Jesus, Mateo groaned and cupped my breasts, running his thumbs over my nipples. I had to curl my fingers into his shirt to stay upright. His touch felt so good. Mateo took his time fondling his new favorite toys, then tipped my chin up and kissed me again, wrapping one arm around me and gripping my asterisk as he held me steady against him. I felt for the buttons on his shirt and began popping them open with shaking fingers. Mateo smiled and shrugged out of his jacket, then his shirt when I had it open, popping off the cufflinks himself. Those joined the jacket, my shoes, and the dress in the ocean. The shirt he tossed up on top of the rocks. Aren't those, expensive? I asked, watching as the cufflinks disappeared into the depths of the water while the sun began to set behind us. F***ck them, Mateo growled. He took off his leather belt and his pants. His boxers joined his shirt up on the rocks, and my mouth went dry. Mateo was naked in front of me. Even though I couldn't see beneath the waist-high water in the waning light, I knew he was ready for me. He wanted me, and I wanted him, and he was all mine. I touched his bare chest, rubbing my thumbs over his nipples as he had mine. He genuinely seemed bothered that I, as a human, had requests and desires, and didn't make me feel guilty for speaking up. What can I do to help? Were the first words out of his mouth, which made me more comfortable to share. Mateo's sharp intake of breath rewarded me. He was no bumbling boy. Mateo stood still and let me explore, his fingertips running up and down my skin, sensitizing and doing some exploration of their own. When he slowly wandered his fingers down my body and found my core, I yelped, "It's okay, Tesora, spread your legs a little more." Yes, just like that. Mateo's deep voice encouraged me. Hard fingers, first one, then two, sought their way inside me, while Mateo massaged my CL*T with his thumb. I let out a sob of need and clung to him. There was a pressure building inside me from where he dallied with his hand, and I knew only he could relieve it. "Mateo," I begged, rubbing myself against him. The pressure increased, and Mateo kissed me hard and passionately as I experienced the first orgasm ever given to me by a man. I gripped his shoulders as shudders overtook my whole body, and he swallowed my cry of pleasure. Mateo slid his fingers out of me then and brought them to his lips. My jaw dropped as I saw him lick my taste off of them. That. I gibbered. Mateo closed his eyes, clearly enjoying the taste of me, then lifted me off the sandy bottom of the ocean with a hand under each thigh, bringing my knees up to straddle his waist. "I'm going to be inside you now," was the only warning I got before I felt something much bigger than his fingers pressing at my entrance. I nodded vigorously and wrapped my arms around the back of his neck. "Hang on tight," Mateo rumbled before gripping my hips and slowly sinking into me. He was being careful, I could tell. Mateo didn't just shove in and take his pleasure. He entered me inch by aching inch. Despite his care, Mateo was also quite large, and I whimpered as I stretched to accommodate him. He motioned me forward since I had previously been near the doorway. Well, I started as I took a few steps forward. I was wondering if I could hang out with my friend Miriam. "It's okay, Tesora," Mateo said, feathering kisses over my face. "It's okay. It might hurt a little, but I'm going to make you feel so good." His C***ck hit a barrier inside me. I was an educated woman. I figured it must be my hymen. "What do we do in?" My question ended on a squeal as Mateo tightened his hold on my hips and plunged. There was a burning protest inside me, but it faded to a dull ache very quickly. Mateo kissed me and nuzzled me. "I'm sorry, Tesora. But that only happens once. I will spend all night making it up to you." He thumbed a tear away from my eye. I nodded, and kissed him. He deepened the kiss and slowly began moving, inching in and out. In and out. The pressure began to build again, especially when Mateo began sucking on my nipples as he moved. My fingers spiked through his long hair, my ankles locked around his back. I began panting, reaching for that magic he'd given me before. "Mateo." I hiccuped when the sweet waves of pleasure washed over me once more. Arena. Mateo groaned against my breast as he pulled my hips flush to his and me deep inside me. We trembled together, Mateo holding us up in the water as our bodies found sweet release. I didn't know what force of will or bastion of strength this man had, but he kept us upright through the entire experience. Whereas I felt as boneless as a jellyfish, "Are you all right?" Mateo whispered in my ear. He stroked my long, wet hair down over my back. "I was about to ask you the same thing," I giggled. "I can't believe you're still standing." Mateo grinned. "Well, if I wasn't standing, it'd come out, and that would be a tragedy. I understand if you don't want her coming to the house, but..." Mateo quickly pushed aside any doubt I was having. "Any guest of yours is welcome here." I blinked. "You're not going to take it out, do you want me to?" Mateo asked, his grin turning into something dark and desirous. I wondered if maybe I'd gotten mixed up with a sex maniac. At that moment, I couldn't see that as a bad thing. "No," I whispered, kissing him. "I don't want you to." "Good," Mateo said, "because there will be a round 2, maybe 3, before we get out of the water." I shivered with anticipation. Chapter 22. Mateo Castellas is alive. *** Marco POV. "Hello, Oscar," I greeted El Lobo through the phone. "Right on time, ***Cur," I chuckled. "Give me back my ***King slaves." I always found Oscar a bit of a hot mess. "I'd assume your slaves would like to be free, if that's all they are to you. Isn't that right, Rochelle, Felix?" I looked at them, their mouths sealed with duct tape, tied to 2 folding chairs. Rochelle was shaking her head vigorously. "What the ***ck did you do to..." Oscar must have taken too long a drag of his cigarette as his dry cough was acting up. They wouldn't give me the answers that I needed. I was hoping you could fix my problem. I had no intention of hurting these 2. I had a daughter myself. I didn't like to kill innocent people if I didn't have to. "What the ***ck do you want?" I laughed at Oscar's arrogance. He thought he was in control here. Yes, he was rich. He sold humans, and shifters, at exorbitant rates to desperate, wealthy scum. But he wasn't a smart businessman. Everyone in Miami knew his trafficking ring was on fragile footing. "I heard from your 2 slaves here that you might have had a certain special lady in your possession recently, but you let her go. The name Catalina Zuleta ring a bell?" His dry cough stopped as I knew I had his full attention. "Yeah, we had her. We lost her. Felix came to me and said she was stolen out of the auction. After I have my beta do a quick screening and background check." That is, a small smirk formed across his face. "That's right. Why hadn't it crossed my mind that Mateo was an alpha? He fit all the characteristics." He paused before continuing. "You the ***ck who stole her?" Oscar was misinformed. "She wasn't lost, stolen, anything of the sort. The ***ck you talking about?" Oscar seemed ready to blow a gasket. I looked over at Felix as I spoke. His face was dark, his expression darker, but otherwise, he was still. "Your main man Felix sold her, Oscar. And for a hefty wad of cash, too. He's probably richer than your ***s now." I couldn't wait to hear El Lobo's reaction to this one. "Stop ***king with me, Marco. Felix ain't the type." Maybe Oscar was just a dumb ***s. Then why do I have a bank statement here from Chase Financial that has 7 digits in it addressed to a Mr. Felix Brown? Surely, you didn't pay your slave that much, did you? This was how I dealt with slimy ***ck's like El Lobo. I had all the information at my disposal. I always had the upper hand. It was hard to lose that way, that ***king rat." Oscar seemed to be in disbelief. I didn't have time for his reactions. "I had a proposal. Now, Oscar, buddy, your man here told me you knew more about the purchaser of Miss Zuleta." I walked over to my liquor cabinet and poured a little gin into a clean glass. I swirled it around as Oscar begged for the purchaser's name. "Patience, Oscar, patience. I'm trying to help you out here." I smirked as I took a sip. "Who's the ***king guy, Marco?" "Stop playing games," Oscar pleaded. "It was hard not to play when I was so good at it." Matias Castaneda. "I'm sure you're familiar, damn it," was all he answered. He knew he was in deep ***t. Nobody messed with Alpha Castaneda. He was enigmatic and stuck to the shadows. I just assumed he was some philanthropic billionaire who rescued women from auctions in his spare time. "Fine," I agreed. "Good," he replied, and then told me, Oh, and if your friend passes the screening, then maybe they can take you out to get some new clothes. But he had the reverence of all the packs in Miami proper. Don't get so down on yourself, Oscar. I'm trying to help you out here, I assured him. He's untouchable, Oscar sighed. I wagged my finger. Not so fast, buddy. No, that's where you're wrong. What the hell are you talking about? I've met him at my auctions many times. He's got contacts, he's protected. I chuckled as I sat back in my chair, swirling my gin around. Did you ever wonder why he was at all those auctions? Without thinking, El Lobo replied, he's a billionaire. He likes having fun with new women, new toys, just like the rest of us horny F***CKs. You see, it's funny you say that, because Felix here tells me the Zuleta girl was the first one he ever took home. It seemed like Oscar didn't know as much about his business as he thought. So, he's picky? Oscar retorted, was he really this ignorant, or was he purposely covering something up? You holding out on me, Oscar. Surely, you're not this much of a dumba *s, I chided. I knew El Lobo was playing dumb now. What secret was he keeping from me? Marco, you're a cocky *shole. You know that, I'll take that as a compliment. Now, talk. I thought I was making a breakthrough. Then, of course, Oscar's inability to cooperate *had everything up. Give me a good reason why I should? Or else I'll kill your two king slaves on the spot. I spat back at him. I was getting annoyed and slammed my glass onto my desk. My daughter stood outside the door, crying out, Daddy, everything okay? I covered up the speaker and yelled out, yes, Serena baby, everything is fine. I could tell he was scanning my outfit with his eyes. He pulled out a black credit card and extended his arm to me. On the house, he said proudly. Damn it, my business was always getting in the way of my family, and vice versa. You think I give two *TS about them? Oscar replied. Yes, because Felix could testify and have your *S in prison for the rest of your life, I reasoned, but I wasn't even sure how El Lobo would react because he wasn't a sane man. Good, let those *king pigs get me then, the line cut, that *cur. I pounded on the desk. I turned my attention to Felix and Rochelle, who were still bound to each other with rope. They were my only chance to get more information. I walked over to Rochelle, who was trembling, and ripped the duct tape off of her mouth. Then, I walked around to Felix and did the same. Talk, either of you. Why was Matias coming around so often? They both stayed silent. Rochelle kept shaking her head no, and tears were coming down her face. I walked over to Felix so I didn't have to see the pitiful sight. My daughter crying was already enough for me. Felix, I want us to be friends, but you're making it difficult. What the F*** is Castaneda doing at the auctions? The bastard wouldn't talk. Fine, two can play at that game. I pulled out my knife from my back pocket and cut the binds from Rochelle. Stand, I commanded. I knew she wouldn't run. I clamped my large hands along her skinny wrists and pulled her towards the wall so that Felix could see his beloved hurt. I pressed her neck against the drywall and looked back at Felix, whose eyes were narrowing, but he still wasn't speaking. You don't understand English? Shall we try in Spanish? ¿Por qué señor Matias iba a los subastas? Why not Matias? I tossed back, and I narrowed the space between our lips again. I tasted notes of bergamot and mint as I worked my tongue around his mouth. My stubborn self wanted to do things the hard way. However, I appreciate that, Mateo, but I'm not here because I want handouts. Felix responded plainly in English, I don't know. Oh, so you know both languages. I knew you were smarter than that, Felix, but, unfortunately, you still aren't smart enough. I raised the knife to Rochelle's cheek and swiped at it, drawing blood. Rochelle cried out, begging Felix to say something. He didn't. Felix, baby, please. Rochelle cried out, but Felix remained silent. I pulled the knife up again and turned Rochelle around to face me. I pointed the sharpened tip to the middle of her breasts. You want your sweetheart dead, you heartless beast. I could tell Felix was wrestling with something inside his dark eyes. They were fluttering back and forth, almost spastic, as if his mind was racing with a million thoughts. He knew the answer I was looking for, but he also was looking to protect something, too. Pressing the metallic point harder, I saw blood start seeping out of Rochelle's chest as she bellowed, ah. Her tears were dropping as fast as the blood. Mateo, what? Speak louder. I commanded. His name is Mateo Castias. Felix's voice was just above a whisper. Rochelle was still sobbing. I withdrew the knife but still held her in my grasp. I nearly dropped my knife upon repeating the name in my head. Mateo. Why did that name seem so familiar, yet so distant, all at the same time? What was he doing there? I followed up. Let her go, first. I was hesitant, but I tossed Rochelle back at Felix. She huddled next to him, clamping onto his arm. Like I said, I wasn't some heartless beast, but I had to do what I had to do to get my way in this dirty game. He grinned and chuckled, and that's exactly why I'm giving it to you. Now, take it. You can pay me back later if this hurts your pride. Felix wisely continued telling me what I needed. He's searching for someone special. Who? His daughter. Mateo Castias? No, it couldn't have been. Mateo, as in El Puma? He died years ago. You're mistaken, Felix. I thought back. I remembered the Castilla's name now. He was the most powerful alpha on all of the eastern seaboard. He died years ago. Nobody knew why, but we expected some foul play. He didn't. How do you know? I questioned Felix. I knew Felix was well connected in the stables, but to know something so groundbreaking. Miami's underground would never be the same if this news was true. I'm looking for someone, too, that put us in a similar position. I helped him. He helped me. Felix's eyes seemed regretful, like it had taken a lot to reveal that. Felix was always a stoic man. Many thought he was heartless, but, it seemed, his hesitancy to open up was a defense mechanism. Everyone in the crime world had their way of protecting themselves. I couldn't blame him. I untied Felix and softened slightly. I'll help you, Felix, if you help me. You know, I'm not the worst guy to deal with. I laughed slightly. You almost killed Rochelle, he said with a gravelly voice, and it got us to this point. I smirked. You can't help me. No one can, Felix declared as he brushed off his pants and stood. I'm a powerful man, Felix. Now, I'll help find whoever you're looking for if you tell me where Mateo's daughter is, I proposed. He shook his head. I have no guarantees on your part. My word isn't enough for you, Felix? I chuckled. In this world, it really wasn't. He hadn't retracted his hand. I scoffed. What exactly do you mean by pay you back? Huh? In the world of the underground, I learned real quickly that there was only one way a man meant by paying him back, and I would have walked out of Mateo's house right now if that was what he was implying. I threw my knife behind me, leaving myself unarmed. You have millions in your bank account now. I'm letting you walk free with your sweetheart here. You can live a great life. I'm not stopping you. You gave me some information, but if you cooperate more, you'll get whoever it is you want back. But you'll have to trust me. Felix looked over at Rochelle, who still was crying, but doing so silently. He tightened his grip around her shoulder. She's at El Lobo's cantina. She's been there all this time. I shook my head in disbelief. All this time you had Mateo's daughter, and you never told him? I thought you two got along? Felix looked directly at me, his expression even. If I told him, I wouldn't have been a free man. I had to protect myself first. I had to wait until the time was right to make a deal with him. I smirked. Felix was indeed a wise man. I slipped Felix my business card. Call me when this is all taken care of. I'll help you find who you're looking for. I owe you one. He took it hastily, and with Rochelle on his arm, he walked out of my office. I paced around the room before I sat down on my executive desk chair. I kicked my feet up on the desk, pulling out my phone. Hey, Augustine, I have a way to get your girl back, I started. Excellent, Marco, I knew you were up for the job. Now, where do we stand? Augustine asked. He probably didn't expect just how messy this situation was about to get. I found out who bought her, and it's bad news. I poured another glass of gin. Who? Matias Castaneda, #chapter23, round 2. That wasn't my first time, but it felt as extraordinary as if it was. He put his arms up as if to surrender. Now, Irina, I don't think we have the same things in mind. My eyes were still narrowed, but I decided to hear him out. Irina was a goddess, plain and simple. I needed a second go-around, this time in the comfort of my own apartment. Shall we head back? I asked, as she was still soaking in the water. Damn, she looked otherworldly in her bare skin, though. I couldn't wait to see more of her. Soon, Mateo, soon. Why do you want to leave already? She looked up at me with those sparkling eyes, which twinkled brighter than the stars in the sky. I began dressing in my briefs that I had tossed up onto the rocks. I figured I could fetch us some towels so Irina wouldn't be so shy on the car ride back. I thought we could do a round too, maybe in the comfort of my penthouse? Only if you wanted to get to know me a little better, that is. I teased. Not back to your mansion? She asked, her eyes wide, ashamed for people to see me with you. Her expression turned a little hard. Absolutely not, Irina, it's just, how do I put this? I don't want to have to wait that long, I assured her. How noble of you, Mr. Castaneda, she smirked. Let me fetch us some towels, and I'll be right back, I declared and jogged off to the cabana where my hired help for the night had all the amenities I needed. I returned to see Irina looking gorgeous under the moonlight. You're wet, I remarked with a grin. That was the lamest joke I've ever heard, she teased as I handed her a towel. She delicately wrapped it around her breasts so it covered most of her body, and wrapped the other around her hair. What can I say? I smirked. Irina had rendered me speechless. I'm a dad, I make bad jokes. The sight of her heavenly tanned skin and shimmering gloss across her lips mesmerized me. I remember, when you were a little girl, you played the cello, is that correct? Correct. I scratched the side of my neck wondering how he knew about that and where he was going with this. I pulled my thoughts back together and led her back to Jeeves, who was waiting for us, the car idling. He greeted us, asking, "Pleasant evening?" I nodded while Irina tossed a coy smile in his direction. The best, I replied. With that, Irina entered the car first, and I followed. The short ride to the apartment was much less exciting than our time on the beach. Irina was lost in the stars on the headliner, and I was keeping my focus out the window so that I wouldn't jump back on her. Our fingers may have grazed each other a few too many times to just be a coincidence. After parting with Jeeves, I led Irina up to my penthouse. I entered the building through the back so no one batted an eye at us while in towels, and we took the elevator up. It's beautiful, Irina exclaimed in awe as she saw the ocean view from the 40th floor. That's the best view I've ever seen. Better than this? I dropped my towel and briefs onto the hardwood floor and heard her gasp, Matteo. She cried out, the door to the hallway is still open. Someone might see. I chuckled, Irina, darling. I took a few steps forward to close the door. I own the whole floor. Latching onto her arm, I led her to the bar. Care for some champagne? What for? She looked confused, as if champagne wasn't a daily palate cleanser. Does there have to be a reason? I unlocked the glass case which held my array of liquors and pulled out one of my rarest, a 1996 Dom Perignon Rose Gold Methuselah. That looks expensive, Irina pointed out as her eyes followed the metallic bottle. Care to do the honors? I walked over to where Irina was on the bar stool, and with some assistance, I helped her pop the cork. The bubbles of the 25-year-old champagne overflowed the rose-colored bottle and onto the floor. A high-pitched squeal came out of Irina's mouth as she started giggling. You still play? He asked, one of his eyebrows raised as if he had an idea in his head. I do, I responded matter-of-factly. Not only did I play, but my major at my university is a fine arts degree with a focus in classical music. Her white teeth caught my gaze as I stared at the beauty in her smile. She made me feel young again, carefree, and invigorated. Irina was an adrenaline boost. She was like a second lease on life. I didn't want this night to end, nor our lives together. Pulling out 2 crystal baccarat flutes, I poured the champagne for the both of us. Cheers, I raised my glass in a toast. To what? She asked with a raised eyebrow. To losing your virginity, I joked, and her eyes narrowed. She guzzled the champagne and poured herself another glass. Hey, in your defense, it didn't seem like your first time, I assured her as she looked at me like she was about to slap me. After downing a second glass, she walked forward and grabbed my C***CK, which was hanging loose since I had disrobed myself at the door. It seems like this time, then, I have nothing to lose, she smirked and pulled me into her chest. She threw off the towel wrapped around her lovely locks, and started stroking my shaft. Her dazzling dark orbs gazed up at me, a mischievous grin across her face. Her hands were warm, her body radiating a slight heat, the champagne igniting some energy into the room. My C***CK was still moist from the ocean, allowing her hands to glide back and forth over it seamlessly. Maybe we should, I started, but Irina cut me off. She wagged her finger at me, she was feeling bold. My turn, she reminded me. Before I could protest, she winked at me, tugging my C***ck and leading me towards my suede caramel love seat near the floor-to-ceiling windows. She unwound her towel from around her body and threw it aside. Where did this wave of confidence come from? I pondered aloud. She licked her lips. But he didn't need to know that. How about a solo performance for yours truly? Mateo requested, his eyes boring into me. Instantly, I wanted to reject the offer. That champagne must be something special. Irina pushed me backward onto the love seat and got down on her knees in front of me. She extended her tongue and worked it up my calf, to my thigh, before teasing the tip of my shaft. Watch porn a lot. I was amazed by her composure, her teasing. It was as if she'd done this 100 times. She licked her lips seductively. Would you think less of me if I did? Well, no, B. I couldn't get the butt out because with her eyes playfully looking up at me, she wrapped her luscious, wet lips around the head of my P***nis, and used her tongue to tease the tip. Her dancing eyes found mine. She knew she had me under her control. I was always a man of power, authority, and decisiveness. I never submitted or succumbed to anyone. But I wanted to see what Irina would do with her newfound autonomy. I didn't know you were a dominatrix, I joked, but the term didn't seem to register with her. I guess if she did watch porn, it wasn't that kind of porn. Shoo, she hushed me, working her lips back around my tip again. She slowly worked her mouth forward, then retracted it, all while staying at the head of my C***ck. Her tongue worked masterfully, but I could tell this was a new experience for her. As her teeth grazed the edge of my girth, I didn't mind. I was mesmerized by her ability so far. As she retreated from my shaft, I heard her exhale, her mouth dripping a bit of my pre-cum. She giggled. It looks like you're wet, Irina said, an echo of my joke from before. I couldn't control myself anymore. The way she gawked at me, the way her boobs were so ripe and bounced with her every movement. How soft, how fresh her whole body was. At that moment, I desired nothing more than to thrust inside her again, to make real passionate love for the second time. I didn't like everything having to be transactional between us. It reminded me of what my father did, and it repulsed me. However, I was also surprised to hear how innocent his request was. I wanted to spread my seat all over her. I wanted to claim her as mine. In a quick motion, I pulled Irina on top of me, resting her on my thighs. Care to go for a ride? I asked, and she nodded. I inserted my length into her P***SSY. She moaned loudly as I entered her. Her lips parted, and her head tilted back. I couldn't see her eyes, but I assumed they were rolling. This is only the beginning, mi tesora, I informed her, and I helped her speed up her motion. With my hands cupping her peach-like breasts, I thrust my torso to get the rocking motion going even faster. Soon, she matched my direction, and rode my C***ck. Tiny, high-pitched moans continued to emanate from her throat, but her eyes were closed. Let me see your beautiful eyes, I commanded. Eye contact always got me off, and Irina had the most enrapturing gaze of them all. She opened them slowly, tipping her chin down to look at me, and now the playfulness returned. She flashed a grin, and I knew she was enjoying every second. I wanted to keep it going for as long as possible. I raised her up and pulled out my C***ck, hoping to keep the experience going longer. I positioned my hands on her narrow waist and rolled her beneath me, inserting my length between her moist folds. I heard Irina moan again. Her arms were gripping the love seat as my thrusts jolted her. I reduced my vigor, but she pleaded for more. Ask and you shall receive, mi tesora. I pumped harder, faster, and simultaneously leaned down to caress her breasts and thumb her nipples. I flicked them and kept my motion consistent while I increased the pace of my thrusts. I'll think about it, I said, trying to buy more time from having to make that decision. It wasn't that I was afraid to perform in front of an audience. Her moans grew louder. I knew she was close to coming undone. I picked up my pace even more, and I could see sweat pooling between her breasts. She wasn't used to this type of workout. Even though she was fit, endurance was a learned skill. I hoped we'd have more time to practice together in the future. I removed one hand from her breast and brought it to her CL**T, massaging that as I continued to move deeply inside of her, circling the nub with my pointer finger. I felt her wet juices dampen my finger. After a few moments, I removed my hand and placed both hands on her hips to get maximum grip as I put my every last effort into my thrusts. Yes, yes, yes. I heard her crying out. My C***ck was buzzing too now, and all the blood was pooling to my tip, but, before I came, she gasped and released a loud moan. Her C*M was slowly dripping, and I brought my tongue to it to taste it. It was sweet and lovely. Surprising me, she jerked me closer, her hand wrapping around my girth. She started building up my erection again, not missing a beat. She brought her other hand around it, and began stroking faster. My C*CK was at its fullest length, and after managing to hold off this long, I knew I was moments from releasing all of it onto her beautiful face. But I needed something more. I wanted to feel another part of her before I came undone. I brought my C*CK towards her breasts, and somehow, she understood what I wanted. She pressed her luscious boobs around my thick C*CK and bounced up and down. This time I was the one to groan. This was exactly what I had wanted to feel. It was that my music brought back the painful memory of my father, who got me interested in playing the cello in the first place. With a deep groan, I spewed my S*Men all over her chest and watched it drip down her breasts. With one hand, she scooped some up and used her tongue to lick it off. Irina pulled me closer to her, and I collapsed onto the love seat. We sat there, both winded, my head resting on her bare shoulder as we looked out at the Miami skyline. That was when I knew this was going to be the start of something beautiful. The flavors were mildly tart with an aftertaste of sweetness, followed by an invigorating spearmint that awakened all of my senses. Works for me, he smiled gently, and I grabbed the credit card out of his hand. My fingers graced his smooth palm as I took the card, and I felt a sharp bolt of adrenaline from the connection. I jumped back, embarrassed by the fact a mere touch had caused that reaction in me. He, on the other hand, remained completely stoic, frozen in place. He didn't move, and I assumed it was a mix of the proximity to this handsome gentleman and my lack of time around men that made me much less composed than he was. I pocketed the card in my gym shorts and kept my head focused on the hardwood flooring as I exited Mateo's office. I was sure my face was flushed, although my tanned skin would have reduced the severity of it. As I reached the entranceway, I heard Mateo on the phone already. He really didn't like wasting time. "Hey Win, I'll be bringing some fresh faces over to you this morning. Go easy on M, easy on M." Those 3 words did enough to leave me feeling unsettled as I started my day. ## chapter 17. Good defense is better offense. Mateo POV, Alpha, my beta, Win, greeted me as I entered his boxing ring with the 2 girls, Irina and her best friend. "I told you, just call me Matias, Win." "It's okay," I reassured him. Win approached me and motioned me aside. He whispered in my ear and admitted, "I know, but I thought with your 2 prospects here I should show them you're at the top of the food chain." I couldn't control my laughter. "Win, these ladies aren't interested in joining the pack." I spoke so that Irina and her friend could hear. "I see." Win took a step back. A waft of mustiness from his sweaty figure entered my nostrils. He was in the middle of training when I called him. I felt the pressure from his hands strengthen as he did his best to keep my body close to his. The sound of his exhaling from his nose made me even more aroused as I could feel the passion passing through him. Irina's friend's eyes had been on Win's toned abs since we walked in, but he didn't know that. If he did, he'd just try and show off in the boxing ring. "So, ladies, what brings you in here today?" Win addressed the 2 women. "We don't exactly know either." I saw Irina give a curious look to her friend who also had no idea because I hadn't told them yet. "Irina's friend needs to be screened, but while you're at it, screen Irina too," I said, and I'm sure that didn't help to quell their curiosity. Win looked equally confused. "Which one is Irina?" "Yeah, who's she?" the friend asked. It escaped my mind that her friend knew her as Catalina. "It's just a nickname he gave me," Irina stated plainly. "Nicknames? You're already in the nickname phase?" the friend made an outburst. At the same time, Win punched my arm playfully, but he had his boxing glove on, and I wasn't prepared for the hit. "You didn't tell me you had a boyfriend," the friend announced. Irina looked at her friend with wide eyes and then glanced at me, hoping I would explain the situation, but I was more curious as to what her response would be. "Excuse Miriam, she just gets a bit overexcited sometimes," Irina pardoned her friend's outbursts. "Mateo here is just a friend of a friend." "Mateo?" Win pondered aloud. "That's Alpha Matias," Irina clarified. "Oh, I know, but he told me to call him Mateo instead, so you are in the nickname phase." The girl, named Miriam, was jumping up and down, unable to contain her giddy excitement. I wondered how the 2 of them were friends since they seemed like complete opposites. But then again, so were Win and I. Irina sighed. Win smirked, and even though I appreciated the lighter conversation versus what I'd been dealing with the past week, I didn't want to let on that I did. "I want to put that man to rest," he confessed, as he moved his mouth away from mine to speak momentarily. Immediately after, I felt fingers leave a trail on my skin as they worked their way to my shoulder blades. "Win, take these girls to the ring," I commanded. "Yes, Matias, girls, let's get you suited up." Win was a professional Muay Thai boxer who had been born in Thailand before immigrating to the States as a teenager. He had trained all the best fighters in the city, professional or underground, and I wanted to make sure any friend of Arena had passed my beta's aptitude test, a test of character as much as it was of skill. Arena and Miriam, after a few minutes, came out of the dressing rooms in boxing-appropriate gear. My eyes immediately locked onto Arena, who was outfitted in a black tank top, some shiny satin red boxing shorts, and white Nikes. I couldn't help but stare, and her outfit left little up to the imagination. It kept my mind racing quickly, and my heart beating even faster. The way her long tan legs came out from the shorts, which sat around her mid-thigh, mixed with the steamy atmosphere in the gym, made them glisten. I saw a few trails of perspiration dripping down the sides of her legs, and my eyes wandered upward and noticed the same around her neckline. Her brunette locks were tied up in a ponytail that added a bit of playfulness to her dangerous physique. "Here, you'll be needing these," Win said as he tossed Arena and Miriam each a pair of indigo-colored boxing gloves. Arena's eyes darted directly over to me, probably wondering what I had gotten her into. She must have been gawking for too long because Win interrupted. "He hasn't done much fighting the past few years. But before that, me and my training buddies called him Gatakorn. It's the Thai word for assassin." "Him, an assassin?" Miriam called out, and I noticed Arena nudging her as if to tell her she did something wrong. I didn't feel the need to defend my name. I had left my fighting days in the past after I lost Lucia, and I had no reason to go back. They lingered on the straps of my dress, and I realized he was having second thoughts. Was it because of our age difference? Was it because we were still technically strangers? Was it because he didn't see me in that way? Did I remind him too much of his daughter? It's what had got me in trouble, and I had Win to train my men now. "Him." Win pointed in my direction. "That man right there was one of the deadliest fighters Miami's fight clubs have ever seen." I sat back in my chair that overlooked the boxing ring. The two girls seemed to be in disbelief. "I didn't know I brought them here for story time," I said with a scowl. Arena's friend was getting pretty comfortable as she huffed. "I'm not even sure why you brought us here at all." Win couldn't contain his composure as he released a quick burst of laughter. Arena looked embarrassed by her friend's behavior as her cheeks flushed ever so lightly. It was a Saturday, so I was feeling a bit more patient, but also, I didn't want to have to put Arena's friend in her place and look like the mean dad. Instead, I nodded my head to Win to suggest he get the training session started, which he did. He went easy on the girls. I could tell by the way he pulled his punches back before they would land. He was trying to show them that a good defense was an even better offense. They worked on agility training and hand-eye coordination exercises. The whole time my focus was exclusively on Arena. Her eyes were narrowed, her jawline set, and her lips firmly shut. Even though Win was teaching her how to avoid incoming attacks, it looked like she was ready to launch a counterattack, like she had some personal vendetta on her mind the whole time while training. I said this was a way for my beta to screen Arena's friend. I figured anyone who could last one day of training with Win had enough character and intestinal fortitude worthy of being Arena's companion. Win could tell a lot about a person by seeing how they reacted in his ring, but, really, I wanted Arena to learn how to build up her strength, to protect herself. I could tell by the work she was putting in that she heeded my advice. I quickly glanced at Miriam, whose gaze seemed more focused on Win's 8-pack than it did his boxing gloves. If anything, I should have been nervous about making a move on him, but I wasn't. After hearing the way he spoke to me, I desired even more of him. If she was in a competition, she would have been incapacitated from getting distracted. Meanwhile, Arena was laser-focused when it was her turn. She kept her gloves raised at all times when Win was throwing his soft punches, as she ducked left and right. However, I could see she wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. Arena started launching a few punches back, which Win expertly dodged, and it left her open to an easy counterattack. Win made contact with her headpiece, which cushioned the blow, and I could tell that he'd restrained himself greatly. I got up from my chair and walked towards the ropes. I wriggled my way between them and approached Irina. Composure, I uttered, huh? Irina stood, confused. Fighting is more than just unloading on your opponent. You have to use that, I pointed to her brain, and those, I pointed to her eyes, to trick your opponent. Wynn jumped in, widely considered the greatest Muay Thai fighter of all time. Samart Payakran allowed the fight to come to him. With his back on the ropes, he once dodged 20 punches, his eyes predicting where the jabs were headed before they hit. Imagine a fighter's psyche, when they train their whole life and can't land a single blow. I finished the story. After that, his first punch landed in a knockout. Match over. Irina wiped the pool of sweat that had collected on her forehead with her forearm. It looked like she wanted to go for a second round. It's all about timing, when to act and when not to act. Knowing the difference is what will determine your fate, in the boxing ring, and in life, I explained. When Lucia went missing, I wanted to attack. I had no specific target. I just wanted to hurt someone, make someone pay, for taking my baby girl.